Spencer, no one's saying anything. Let there be light. I don't know that we hear these scribes do that.
Where's the music? What's going on? Where's the guy saying how exciting this talk will be?
Morning. Welcome to Spencer Shepard is on the how do you call it? Echo? Okay, so things. Sign the blue sheets. As David Black observed. All right. Oh, sorry. Sign the blue sheets. As David Black observed, it's your name and organization. I believe the emails are being captured during your registration. You all have seen the note well during the registration process. I'm not going to read it over here, but everything you say is important and meaningful to the IETF, and you know the drill. Any changes to the agenda? I know Spencer sent it out, bashed it a bit. Anything online? Anybody else? Okay. Who's besides Spencer is?
We've got Alex McDonald.
Alex McDonald, Matt Benjamin,
Tom
Tom Talpe,
Talpe,
Trond Mikkelbust, the Norwegian. Okay, okay. All right. No changes to agenda. We'll dive right in. That means Tom.
So supposedly there's a pink box up here that I'm supposed to remind you to stand in, so I don't see a pink one. We'll go with the outline.
It's your glasses. It's a pink one.
Okay.
So I have one thing before. Martin Stiemerling, you're responsible AD.
Can you please state your name according to the sign?
I just said it, Martin Stiemerling, you're responsible AD.
Oh, I thought it said
But sorry, my voice is really like going almost away. I will shut up for the rest of the session, so it's just like my initial words on. There is still a number of errata for many NFSV4 documents, and I would appreciate if the corresponding authors just look at the errata and let me know if this is like correct, if it's just stupid, or and then we can see that we get that out of the system and say done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
All right. So we'll start with 4.2. So I'm wondering how many working group last calls we can go through. The good news is we've got implementations out there. People are putting running code behind this, and they're finding issues. So for example, with the copy, server-side copy, we found it was useful to track some state across the destination back to the source, so we added an state ID. We got rid of the NFS URL because it was put forth in the original document for the copy many years ago. It's not been useful, and we couldn't see anyone using it. So these have all spawned last calls, and then, BP, could you advance? We, at LSF in Boston a couple weeks ago, we were talking not only with NFS implementers, but we were also talking with some of the SCSI layer people, for example, and they pointed out that instead of just doing a server-side copy where the copy could be asynchronous, you could implement a clone function, and the clone function would be the server could do cal, copy on write, then just do it. It would return instantly, so you would get rid of all of the heavy mechanisms for tracking the asynchronous operation, which was easier for the client. And we saw, for example, Martin Peterson was talking about they were going to put it in for the SCSI layer in Linux. So this is why Christoph proposed a clone operation, right?
Next.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And now we've been asked on the working group alias, do we stay or do we go? Do we push server-side copy and clone out of 4.2? And I can't recall whether they were asking for all of server-side copy or just the server-to-server one. Bruce said it would be a great test for minor versioning, so Dave has got to talk on this a little bit later. And my response is, well, you know what? We almost have working implementations of the entire spec. I'd rather tackle the issues, go on, get this out there, because either way, we're going to have some delay. Either we axe out some text and we have to go do another last call on it, or we add some text and we have to go do another last call on it. So pain-wise for me, it's the same. And I'd rather not do radical surgery at this point. So any questions on the state of 4.2? Any feelings one way or the other about, my intent is to keep this stuff in there and to push forward. Any strong objections?
When you say this stuff, do you mean both of them?
Both of them. Thank you, Chuck. I mean to include both the clone and the copy, because I also think that when we started out to do 4.2, we pointed out that we should be adaptive enough to take in something at the last moment that made sense and was well thought out. So we have a clone implementation or two already in the field, well, in Christoph's private branch that you can get to, right? We know that other server vendors can support a clone operation easier than they can support a copy operation. And indeed, their copy operation might be a clone in the first place. Oh, and Chuck, I'm supposed to ask you to go to the microphone next time. I can feel the mental images. So, BP, I think that's it for that slide deck. Can we find another, please? So I just broke them all up into different slide decks that made sense.
Oh.
So I had more. I have like 3 more sets that went out last night. Okay. I defeated BP's organizational skills. I mailed them out to Spencer, so they would have been up on the organizational site. Well, let me mail them to you now.
I have these right here.
Yeah, so.
I'll leave mine.
Yeah,
That
sure.
was the view. I know those.
Oh.
I have RCC already made, bi-direction, FedFS next steps, update, and this already been
Let me get you.
Apologies, we're loading the slides. They are now. They are now online. They weren't 5 minutes ago. Okay, so which one do you want next? Sorry.
The saving, or the docket, sorry.
Docket updates. Got it.
Right, and then I think there's a PowerPoint on the this last update. I just put it on.
Okay. Sorry.
All right, so we have two documents, 7530 and 7531, which are going to be published any moment now, right? And I think they were evil because I think they waited until they could get the 7530 ID so that we could confuse it with 3530 whenever we talk about the BIS and the non-BIS.
Yeah, they do that deliberately often.
Yeah. So, next please. The LNFS registry, really interesting discussion about whether it's specifically for NFS or whether it could be applied to all protocols. We went back and forth on that. It can be used by other protocols. The text has been changed. And we're basically waiting for a telechat slot to pull this forward. One of the things I'm not sure everyone's aware of is our ADs are overworked in this area. No, this was something I wanted to point out that, you know, we have a lot of documents coming down the pipe at the same time, and there's going to be some delay. Yeah. So I believe the next slide deck.
Next slide.
I think so. There's nothing else on this one, is there? I wrote it last night.
Flex file?
Yeah, sure, we can do that one. So the good on the flex file. So the flex files is a new PNFS layout type that we've proposed, and we sent it through working group last call. There was a client implementation in the Linux kernel that is now live, and we have 3 different server implementations in development. Specifically, Tigran at DESI is doing a Java-based one. Philippe Denel with Ganesha is hacking it up to do something with Luster. That's great. And then Primary Data is doing an implementation. So that's the good. Next, please. The bad, the working group last call. Basically, a confusion on the use of UID and GID for fencing. So the way that the the MDS enforces fencing with the DS is it uses a UID and GID that's synthetic, that it passes to the client for access, and then the client can apply these when it reads to the third-party DS. So the big confusion is this is labeled as a security model, and it's not a security model. I take a large part of the blame on not changing the section title. I'll go ahead and do that in the next pass. But, everyone in the working group gets confused when they review the document, and that's a big, large red flag for me, because I know when it goes outside the working group, there's going to be a lot of confusion as well with other people taking it as a security model and being concerned with it. So I need to go straighten that out. And now the ugly. Can we have the next, please? Fencing has interactions with curb-rise access. So in a NFSV3 world, we can, or a non-curb-rise world actually, we can get away with just passing a straight UID and GID. In a curb-rise world, we have to pass a principal. And the principal would be in the user at realm notation. Unfortunately, if you look at flex files, with flex files, the DS is something that's not owned by the same people who developed the NDS necessarily. So you can't make changes to the DS. So to have the client connect to the MDS with one user and then connect for writes and reads to the DSs as another user is problematic. There have been several suggestions on how to do this with, for example, make the MDS be a domain in itself, and it hands out the tickets and credentials to the client. The other suggestion has been just to drop curb-rise access as a requirement. And I'm wanting to see winces in the crowd to see if people are paying attention. Is this something that will go forward in the IETF if we try to remove the curb-rise access?
Well, you don't only have to do that.
Can we talk about that?
So if you did that, you'd only have to do it for the loose coupling case.
You need to say your name,
There's
please.
the confusion that we keep having between
Dave Novak's talking.
between flex files and the loose coupling model.
Okay.
Maybe we need, at least in discussion, keep those more separate.
Right, but I still was wondering what the, we've had the requirement in 3530 and in 5661 that all the implementations have to provide curb-rise access. The customer does not have to deploy it. Does that type of language still apply to mandatory to implement?
It's different between saying that NFSV4 has to support it, or any, and going further and say any feature of NFSV4 has to support it. And this, I think that would be taking it too far.
All right. So, Martin, as the AD, have you? Oh, Richard's going to.
I'm relying Trond, and he says not on object or block.
What?
I'm relying Trond, and
Yeah.
he says not on object or block.
Okay. Is there a requirement that we have to have the higher security in place?
Martin Stiemerling, I'm thinking. It mainly depends on you guys and what the intended environment for this is. If you're okay saying we can just drop it and still have our level of comfort, then it's okay. If you're, let's say, if you run this like on a public hot place somewhere, then you might rethink about saying we need the higher level.
Okay.
But it's like, it's wrong. We need to really judge it with like good judgment.
Okay. Thank you, Martin. I think that's after that slide deck. Oh, it's simply, you mean slide deck?
Yeah.
it would be PNFS requirements for yes. I did the separate slide deck so it'd be easier for people later, not necessarily on you.
So hang on, there's Spencer has raised the question. Tom, how do you want to plan on? How do you plan on closing on Cabros?
On the working group mailing list.
Okay, good.
So we're talking about requirements for layout types. Again, the back history for this was that as people started to write new proposals for layout types, there were confusions in 5661 from chapters 12 and 13, where chapter 12 laid down the groundwork for what was a layout type, and then 13 presented the file layout, and it was hard to differentiate the separation of the two for some people. Next slide, please. So it lives. It got past working group last call. And then Martin asked me to change it from info to standard. And actually that was, we had that discussion before we sent it up and decided to just see what Martin would ask for. So that added another working group last call. Next, please. And I have a really great review of the draft. It happened a month ago, and I still need to read the rest of the review and go through and address it. The upshot is we're going to need another working group last call. Novak. Valid points, so what was acceptable as an info might not be as acceptable as a standard. Just have to grind through looking at the review and going through the comments. Any questions? I'm done.
Your last one?
Yeah, I'm done.
So why are you changing decks? That's Martin Stiemerling speaking. Since we had the question about the NFSV4 LFS registry, so it's now on the telechat on April 9. So just to let you know, I used the time to make it happen. What was that?
So he's got the LNFS separate one for the telechat.
Right after the first one, which is next slide.
So my slides worked.
Yes.
It's a time by noise.
So you cover okay, the element is registry, right? So you got 3530 disks, 4.2 registry, requirements for layout types, flex file layouts. Okay. FedFS topics. Chuck. These things aren't.
Nope.
Nope.
Okay.
The FedFS ones. Right there on the upper. Okay, the upper left. Yeah. I wanted to really briefly bring people up to date on what's going on with FedFS documents. Next slide. There's There are two documents. One is the FedFS admin protocol, and one is the FedFS NSDB protocol. They've been clustered with NFSV 4.0 BIS and the XDR document. They've been assigned RFC numbers, and all authors have authorized both documents, so they're ready to move forward. Next slide. I have two personal drafts. They're tiny documents. They're on the data tracker website. I'm sort of looking for some input about what is the next step for those documents. I think maybe moving them to working group. What's the opinion of the room? No opinion. Okay. They're short. They're only a few pages. So, and unfortunately, they're kind of outside the expertise of the NFS group. They're LDAP related, and I heard some scurrilous rumors that the LDAP working group is going to be reformed, at least to work on a follow-on to 2307. But I'm not sure we can rely on those experts for commentary on these documents. So there's an expertise gap here. So that's why I'm kind of unsure about how to proceed. Okay, no opinion?
We should have one.
I agree.
So maybe to send out pointers to the mailing list of the documents and ask for
Review. Okay.
yeah, review and acceptance into the working group.
Okay, will do. Okay, next slide deck. That would be updating. Yeah, that one.
More stuff.
We did this on purpose.
RDNA
Yes, thank you.
Did I just see something?
Yes, I will try to go as fast as possible. No, honestly,
Oh, he needs his time to sleep.
Next slide. Okay, this is slide 2.
You know, this is like playing a multi-key organ.
Yes. Be thankful you don't have to work pedals too. Slide 2. So slide 2. I think we need to agree that there's work to do here. So that's sort of the purpose of this slide, is to come to a conclusion about what needs to be done with these documents, because we think there are some clarifications needed and inadequacies, and so I'm going to propose a strategy, a framework for updating these specifications, and hopefully we can get some agreement, some consensus on this. Slide 3, please. Just really quickly, I'm going to enter some useful definitions into our group consciousness here. So to start with, there's this idea of bulk payload, which is an RPC argument or result that it can be eligible for RDMA, which means that it can be transferred with an RDMA read or write. The purpose being, an example of such an argument, it would be like the data portion of a write, an NFS write. Something that would benefit from speed up of movement via direct placement. So that's kind of a special treatment, and so we have this idea of an upper layer binding, which is a set of rules usually set out in a normative document that require, or not require, but there are only particular operations, read and write being the two specific ones for NFS version 3, that are allowed to use a bulk payload. And the upper layer binding also describes which RPC arguments or results may be considered for a treatment as bulk payload. So basically everything is treated normally except for read and write and the data arguments therein for our current binding.
You said NFS version 3?
That's right. So RFC 5667 is a upper layer binding for NFS version 2 and 3, and it has a section 5, which is binding for NFS version 4 and 4.1. Next slide. So I'm unfortunately going to have to get a little detailed about how this works, so that the following slides make more sense. So an RPC over RDMA message consists of three components: the RDMA header, an RPC header, which is a normal RPC protocol header, and the upper layer protocol message, which is in our case NFS. And there's an inline portion which is always sent via RDMA send, and that just is treated sort of like a datagram. That always contains the RPC over RDMA header. It may or may not contain the RPC header and the upper layer protocol message. I'll get into that in a minute. The RDMA header, the piece that's always sent inline, contains some lists called chunks that describe the bulk payload. Next slide. So the reason why those definitions were important is that we've got what's called an RDMA message and an RDMA no message type RPC message, which distinguishes between how the chunks are moved versus how the whole RPC message is moved. No message means the whole RPC, the RPC header, the upper layer protocol message, any data, arguments, or results are moved via a chunk. With RDMA message, only the bulk payload is moved via RDMA transfer. Everything else goes in RDMA send. I know that's sort of hand wavy at the moment, but bear with me. So next slide. So here are our existing documents. These were clustered with 5661 through 5665 5 years ago in 2010. We have a document that describes RPC over RDMA. That's 5666. We have a document that describes the upper layer binding for NFS, which is 5667. Next slide. So after working on the Linux and Solaris implementations for 18 months, we've kind of come to some conclusions about exactly how these need to work, how RPC over RDMA needs to work. That requires some clarifications to 5666. We need to restrict the behavior of RDMA no message, in my opinion, so that it makes it, so the requirements about this are more explicit to both server and client implementers. I'm not really going to go into details here, but that's one thing. There are other areas of the document that need some clarification. We don't think these clarifications will require any changes to the protocol. I think that's probably the important thing. Next slide. There are some potential enhancements that would require some protocol changes. So I'm putting these on a separate slide so we can consider them separately. Bidirectional RPC, I'm going to talk about a little later. That will probably require some changes to the on-the-wire protocol. It may or it may not in the end, but I think it will require it. There's some other features. Message chaining is, instead of using RDMA read and write, we would build large messages with just by setting a bit in the inline portion that says, oh, by the way, the next message is also part of this one, so we can build quite large messages just by using RDMA send. That is useful in some cases. Remote memory region invalidation is where the client signals to the server, would you please invalidate this memory region for me, instead of me having to actually explicitly invalidate it once the operation is done. That is actually a performance enhancement, and that also may or may not require wire protocol changes. Next slide. So to update the RPC over RDMA specification, if we choose to do only the clarifications, we can use the errata process to target narrowly the text changes that we need to do, or we can create a single document that updates that document that has all the changes we're interested in. I kind of like option 2. So the bottom bullet point, if we have any interest in extending the protocol, we would do a protocol version bump and actually we would be forced to create a new normative document. So I guess what I'm asking is, do we have the stomach for updating the RPC over RDMA protocol, or do we just want to address the clarifications? Or do we have enough information to make that choice right now?
The big question is who's going to do the work.
I'm volunteering. I think Tom Talpe will oversee or will participate as much as he can.
Can I ask another, a different type of question?
You may. Yes.
So does you're presenting the possibility of extensions and changes to the protocol motivated by use cases that are important to you?
Yes.
That you would desire these changes? So
yes.
They're not just like...
That's right.
Okay, and you and Tom are kind of stepping up to do this?
Yes, we are.
Okay. David Black has approached the microphone.
David Black, can we go back to the clarification slide? Because the answer might have been lurking in there and Chuck went through it. Okay. If you implement, I apologize, these are going to sound like process questions, and they are. If you implement according to 5666, does no message work?
If you understand the intent of the authors, then you can make it work. However, there are some gray areas and leeways in the protocol specification that would allow an implementer to choose to implement something that would not interoperate with the current implementations.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Right, that some implementations have already made choices that would be consistent with what you think the correct version is. Is that true?
Dave Novak asks if there are already inconsistent implementations. I'm not sure.
Okay. Let me make sure the AD is online, so I'm about to rephrase what you said in AD speak. I believe what you just said is that RFC 5666 is insufficiently specified to reliably yield interoperable implementations.
Yes.
Okay.
We believe that's true.
Okay. Given that, errata are inappropriate, and you should plan to rev it and replace it with a spec that does get to interoperable implementations. I'm hoping the AD nods his head vertically. I'm sorry? Okay, so the proposition is that 5666 has been insufficiently specified to yield interoperable implementations. The question on the floor is, can this be rectified via errata? And I suggest the answer is no. You actually need a doc that is actually interoperable, as opposed to having to go look at the errata to figure out what the authors might have read.
And before we go on, I think maybe we should hear from Tom Talpe. I'm sure he has some comments about whether or not...
We have implemented priority queuing at the microphone in the room.
It's called preemption, you know. So, but that was the question for the 80s. So that's the 80s speaking, at least. I think errata is like when somebody finds it, it can put into the errata system. But then if it's like something which is like really severe, like, okay, we cannot talk to each other, then you should be doing a document update where you put RFC 56666 and the errata together, so that you have something which somebody can take, implement, and then talk to the other end. Yeah.
So the preference in the room is to do an update document if we're only talking about these clarifications. We haven't answered the question of whether we would like to consider further enhancements to the protocol.
So I'm relaying Tom Talpe. First, he agrees to also pick up the work and work on this update document. And he also wants to comment that 5666 is sufficient for NFS version 2 and version 3, but it's insufficient for the compound observation of version 4.
David Black says bingo.
David Black says, okay, that comment relayed from Tom to me is a smoking gun that says we need a 5666 bis that nails V4 to the floor, because clearly the current 5666 doesn't do that.
It's a little more complex than that, but yeah.
Okay, so I think you've got a let's see, should leave it to the chairs to call sense of the room, but I think we can figure out where this one is heading. Discussion on what else to do while we're in there is the next question.
And again, a comment by Tom. An update of the document 5666 is of course okay, but strictly speaking it is not necessary for version 2 and version 3. And it also needs an update to 5667 to nail version 4 on the floor, just as David mentioned.
Right, and those are the next slides.
Sorry, let me summarize something here.
Okay.
I believe we are converging on the doc has to be revved to address the inconsistencies or lack of precision in the current spec, regardless. So boom, we're there. You and Tom have proposal for additional work, which is certainly a little bit more than cleaning up the spec and clarifying things. I feel like I want to say make a proposal for the changes to the working group alias and a commitment to produce the verbiage and then start vetting it. Is that fair?
Sounds okay to me.
And not going to stop you from working, right? Right? Okay.
So John, what slide are we on?
Yeah, I'm try next slide. Next slide. Oh, do we want to? Okay, I think you addressed that already. So next slide. So we're on slide 10 now. All right. So this is the sister document 5667, which is an upper layer binding for the NFS protocol. Section 5 covers the NFS v4.0 and 4.1 binding. We believe it is inadequate. There are at least 2 glaring errors. There's no symlink operation in NFS v4. Symlinks are created with the create operation in v4. The language of section 5, though, calls out symlink, so that's clearly an error. And the language around NFS v4 compound is ambiguous. It's really not very clear whether it says basically NFS v4 read is treated like the earlier bindings. And the problem is an NFS v4 compound is an array of operations. And, you know, if you sort of squint, you could consider one operation in a compound as something that is bulk RDMA, bulk payload, which I think was not the intention of the authors of the document. So that's an ambiguity that can lead to non-interoperability that we would like to address. There are a couple of other bullets on this slide, which I will get to a little bit later, so let's move on to slide 11. So we think there are probably 2 options here. The first option is to leave the NFS v2 and v3 portion of 5667 alone and create an updates document, a normative document that would replace section 5 of 5667. The other option, question from the floor.
I think not a question. Tom just wanted to point out that since 5667 was written, the compound operation has evolved, and he agrees with it.
Okay. The other option we have is to create a BIS. That would copy the sections that we want to keep and replace the sections that we need to fix. Any sense from the floor how to proceed with this, whether to go with a repair or replace? I think our preference is to create a 5667 BIS.
So replying Tom, replace. So his preference obviously seems to be also to replace the entire document. And speaking as an author of another BIS document, I would also say it's probably easier for a new implementer to follow a full spec in a separate document rather than figuring out which parts of which documents to put together.
That is also my feeling, that the RFC editor referred this as value to the reader, to collect all the errata and updates and fixes in one document. That's going to be the best outcome for implementers. Is there a consensus? Tom and I are volunteering to work on the BIS.
So this document?
Yeah.
Really?
Next slide. So we've identified some areas that are not covered by these documents. Next slide. This is slide 13. Neither document addresses the issues with operating RPC sec over RDMA transports. There are some interesting questions, not necessarily with the authentication only, but when you start talking about integrity checking and encryption, that means the host CPU has to touch the bytes in the payload, which is the reason why we like RDMA, is because you don't have to, the host CPU doesn't have to touch the bytes in the payload. The current Solaris implementation uses RDMA no message for integrity and encryption, just because it has to touch all the bytes, and so there's really no purpose in doing a direct placement. So, go ahead.
Relying Matt Benjamin, he's asking if it has any possible implementation.
If what has any possible implementation?
This particular, I guess the offload part of this.
You would have to rely on the hardware to handle the GSS parts of the protocol. So I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Next slide, slide 14. NFSV 4.2 does not have an upper layer binding. We have 4.0 and 4.1 in section 5 of 5067, but we don't have one for NFSV 4.2. We think Read Plus would need some discussion about, are we going to allow all arms, all content arms to be transferred as bulk payload, or only the data content arm? There may be other operations that have been introduced in 4.2 that are interesting for consideration for RDMA. So I put up 3 options for dealing with 4.2. We kind of like, I think Tom likes 2. I don't really have a preference. Dave, you liked, I think, 1. One is cover the upper layer binding for 4.2 in the same document. We cover 0, minor version 0 and 1.
I really should be sitting down here next to the mic. Relying Tom Talpe, he's okay with 1 or 2.
Yeah. So I had a question in general. How do you propose are you going to add some language to describe what happens as a new version comes out so that you're not covered by this problem in the future?
So I thought about that a little bit. Maybe Talpi also has some opinions about it. My opinion is maybe it should be added to the minor versioning rules. There's nodding here in the room. Does Tom Talpi have an opinion?
So relying again, there is language in RFC 5666 requiring some document to cover this, but it does not specify which document. So it's up to a decision here in the room.
Okay. So do we feel up to changing the minor versioning rules to add a requirement for an RDMA upper layer binding as part of new specifications?
Well, only if they do something that's applicable. If they're doing something that creates bulk data. featured definition document, finding that no operation leads to resolution.
Dave Novak says the minor versioning rules should qualify the requirement to only if there is an operation that has a bulk payload argument or request or result. Sense of the room? Okay, no opinion.
Can I ask you a favor? So you got some opinions on a couple of things.
Yeah.
I'm trying to write them down. When the minutes go out, review the notes where you didn't get closure. Let's do it on the alias.
Okay.
I had no sleep for about
Understood.
36 hours.
Okay. Go ahead.
So again, relaying Tom, we could leave some of these things open to interpretation, but perhaps discuss this further in the process of updating 5666.
Okay, I think we'll move that to the mailing list. Meanwhile, I think we have some rough consensus that option 1 on slide 14 is what we're going to do about NFSV 4.2 in specific. Okay?
Yep.
Yeah, 2 would cause yet another last call for that 2.
Right.
Yeah,
I think Tom's about to run the screen out of the room.
Okay. Next slide. This is slide 15. So I don't think we need to worry about data server server operations because those would be covered by NFSV 4.1, which we're already going to fix up in a 5667 BIS. But I think the metadata operations in NFSV 4.1 need to be visited specifically. Especially the large MDS operations, probably need to be covered by some language somewhere. I'm not sure they're RDMA eligible, but maybe we need to say that explicitly in some document. Next slide. This would be additional work. NFSV 4.1 on block is interesting because you can use it with ISER and SRP, which are block on RDMA protocols. Maybe there are no changes required for those. But there are some interesting new persistent memory technologies that would be very nice to include in a layout scheme. Again, I'm not qualified to discuss exactly what changes we'd need to layouts, but I think that's something that we need to keep on the radar screen going forward. I can't believe I just said that. Final slide. Are there any more open issues? Any discussion, further discussion? Okay.
Roughly speaking, so you go back, you send out the open issues to the mail list, but you and Tom are volunteering to do the drafting. I feel this compulsion inside me to ask, when do you expect to get something, words out where people start to chew on?
That's a very fair question, and in fact, if Spencer were here, he'd probably ask the same one. I don't have an answer for that, but I would expect in the next 6 to 9 months we'd have some first draft. Probably, I'm not sure before the next IETF meeting, but maybe the meeting after that would be a good target.
Okay. At least it would be really good for the next meeting to at least have the outline of the areas that you are playing in, and just to keep the ball rolling and engaging the working group alias. Okay, and maybe give an update.
All right. Yes, agreed.
Okay.
Next presentation.
Just final comment from Tom. Yes, agree that an outline is needed soonish.
thing be called?
RDMA bidirection. Bingo. First try.
Got it in one. Okay.
So the NFSV 4.1 specification requires implementations to implement a back channel. We don't have such an implementation for RDMA transports today. There are two interesting choices for that we consider for our Solaris and Linux interoperation. The first one is that the client initiates a TCP connection to the server and uses it only for back channel operations. The other one would be to plumb bidirectional RPC support into the RDMA transport. So I today want to talk about these two and describe a prototype that we built of number 2. Next slide. So we initially implemented number 1, and the slide describes a little bit about how that would work. Basically, it creates session time. The client, either the client or the server, can advertise to the other that, oh, hey, I only have 4-channel support. So once that transport is established and the create session succeeds, the server discovers, oh, wait a minute, there's no back channel, and asserts the CB path down sequence flag. The client sees that and then notices, oh, there's no forward channel support on this transport, so I will set up a separate TCP transport. Does a bind connection to session and then only does back channel operations on that transport. Pretty straightforward. Tom has suggested that the CB path down piece of this isn't really necessary. No, it's not really necessary. It was a choice for this particular implementation. The Solaris TCP sidecar implementation does not use CB path down, but I figure we should use the same logic for initial connection that we would use for disconnect and recovery. So that's why I chose to do it this way. Next slide.
That's sewage pipes being flushed.
Or it's a very large basilisk of some kind, sort of slithering by. There are, for those who are remote, there are noises that are going by our room that are rather ominous sounding. So slide 4, there are some advantages and disadvantages to the sidecar approach. Our favorite pro is that we would require very few changes, if any, to NFSV 4.1 servers. They're already required to support sessions that use multiple transports. The disadvantage is that there would be some work required in NFSV 4.1 clients to make this happen. This is not something that happens automatically in most implementations that we're aware of. Next slide. So because of this, we decided to look at adding bidirectional RPC support in RDMA transports. We could use a single connection in that case that would support both the back channel and the 4-channel. So it would work exactly like the TCP transports work today. A disadvantage of this is that there are complex changes required at the transport layer. I believe there are protocol changes needed, but that remains to be confirmed with the definition. Tron suggested another reason why we might want to try this prototype is that it would demonstrate whether or not our internal abstractions were capable of supporting bidirection on a new and different transport. So we decided to embark on a prototype. I'm doing the Linux client implementation, and a colleague of mine at Oracle is implementing this in the Solaris server. Next slide. The original RPC over RDMA protocol has a copy of the RPC XID in the RPC over RDMA header at a fixed location. However, when a back channel request comes in to the client's reply handler is looking at this and going, I don't recognize that XID. So there needs to be some way that the reply handler can look at this incoming message and go, oh, this is actually a back channel call. I don't have an XID for this, and I need to process it like a back channel call instead of like a 4-channel reply. So the easiest way to do this detection of call direction is to indicate it somehow in the RPC over RDMA header or in a fixed field. The RPC over RDMA header is varying length, and in order to walk up the header and look into the RPC header, that would require double parsing the RPC over RDMA header, and we don't want to do that. This is exactly why we have a copy of the XID in that header. So next slide. So what I did was I added a couple of RPC over RDMA message types. I don't think we need two. We could probably get away with one. But this is the XDR change that I did for the prototype. Slide 8, please. Another problem we had to deal with is managing receive buffers on the client. Today, the client posts a receive buffer for each outstanding RPC, so there are no receive buffers posted when there are no RPCs outstanding. We also have to think about what numbers to post in the credit field in the RPC over RDMA header, and how those are accounted for separately from the forward channel credits. Next slide, please. So the way large RPC messages are sent between client and server is that they're, and by large I mean larger than the inline size. In other words, too large to be sent by RDMA send, is that they're placed in a large buffer and an RDMA read or write is done by the receiving end. And we kind of don't want to do that for back channel, because that would require the client to actually do the RDMA read and write operation. Today the server does all of those. That would expose client's memory to the server. We don't want to do that either. So for the prototype, we are restricting back channel operation only to messages that can be passed in line. So that's about 1 kilobyte. So if we're going to consider a longer term solution, we'd like a way of sending messages that are unrestricted in size, especially if the back channel is going to be Kerberized, because GSS does add quite a bit of payload to the RPC header that could push these messages larger than the inline size. Anyway, that's something to think about going forward. Slide 10, please. Yeah, this is probably not really interesting, so let's go to slide 11. As I mentioned before, there's some receive buffer handling that needs to be added on the client side at least. The receive buffers are fungible. That means they can either catch an incoming forward channel reply or an incoming back channel request. The hardware basically picks whatever receive buffer is next in line, and that catches the send. So basically we have to post enough receive buffers for both sets, the 4-channel and the back channel. Next slide. And then we have to remember to repost the back channel receive buffers after a transport reconnect. Otherwise a disconnect would cause all those to go away and never come back. So notice that a bind connection to session prevents the server from sending back channel calls before the client has had a chance to actually post the receive buffers. I was a little worried about that race at first, but I think the upper layer is going to prevent the server from sending back channel calls before the client is ready. Next slide. This is slide 13. And this might be obvious to some who are looking at this situation, but the buffer sizes, the receive buffer sizes and send buffer sizes on both ends have to be exactly the same for both the forward channel and the back channel. So we have to have some mechanism for managing that size for both sides to agree on exactly how large these things can be. Slide 14, please. So these are the challenges we've kind of identified in the prototype, and I think taken together, it suggests that we do need some wire protocol changes to make this work well. Maybe folks have other ideas about how to fix these issues without a wire protocol change. I'd be interested in hearing those. Anyway, I think this is the last slide. Is it the last slide? Yeah. Are there any questions?
Okay. When you're speaking of protocol changes, what level would they be at?
This would be changes to the protocol specified in 5666, so RPC over RDMA.
So again, relying Tom Delphi. So if everyone agrees, should these happen in the 5666 BIS or a new document?
Spencer?
Spencer has left the room. He has a conflict.
Spencer, I hate you.
Their response to that.
I think the usual process would be to defer this until we see some proposals.
Okay, I'll just write down new doc or BIS open question.
Okay. Thank you for your attention.
Okay. Thank you for the organized slides, by the way.
There's another question. I guess PP will hate this. Is there a process obstacle to BIS?
Say again?
Is there for Matt Benjamin, relying, is there a process obstacle to BIS?
I can definitively say that I do not know the answer to that question.
Okay.
Does somebody?
I don't think there is.
David? No, the other David. Is there a process obstacle around doing a BIS approach to this work as opposed to a new document? I think is what the question is being asked, right?
Okay, David Buck, let me make sure I understand the question. If I understood the question, it was effectively a, should this be a BIS draft that replaces and in effect obsoletes the old protocol versus just write an add-on draft that updates?
I think writing a new draft that supersedes is what.
That would be a BIS, yeah.
A BIS would supersede. So I think your process choices are I'm going to drop out of the IETF process speak. I think your process choices are replace the existing doc wholesale, or write an add-on doc that explains what gets added to make the existing one run bidirectionally. Is that the question?
Yes.
I think the requirement here would be that we'd have to bump the RPC of RDMA version protocol, and that would require a new document. Whether that's an updates or an obsoletes, I'm not sure, but I think that's probably going to be an obsoletes. Or maybe we actually have to replace it.
If the only way to negotiate this is to bump the master rev number, then I think what happens is you leave the existing doc in place, and you don't obsolete it, and you write a new one that is the new and improved, grand, glorious, shining version, the same way that the V4 docs should not have obsoleted the V3 docs. I don't believe they did. So you can play the same game here, where you've got more than one version valid. You will need to put text into the new doc that makes it absolutely positively clear how down negotiation to the old rev works when I've got a new one and an old one that want to talk to each other.
I think there's language in 5666 already that describes the down rev process. Yeah.
So again, relying Tom Telpy. So he comments that this is a two-step perhaps, and there are more urgent issues which may require the BIS for the other ones, and so an additional document for this particular change. And RFC 5666 BIS does not require a new version.
David Black, the other reason that I'll comment on perhaps writing a separate doc is that some of what I think I've heard you say, Chuck, I'm trying to follow along and do email at the same time. I realize that's not a best practice. Makes it sound like what the right thing to do might be is to write up the protocol that includes the bidirectional RPC, bump the version number, and publish as experimental.
I think that would be a separate document. I think we want a BIS to fix the problems in the original version 1 of this RPC protocol.
Okay, in which case you should keep the stuff that you're not sure about separate from whatever standards track doc fixes the bugs. 'Cause some of what I'm pretty sure I've heard in bidirectional is suggesting to me that the bidirectional stuff ought to be specced so people can implement it and tagged as experimental, because I'm pretty sure I heard you say you're not quite sure what's going to happen when you fold this into implementations.
Well, there are certain open questions like how we're going to deal with large messages, for example. So yes, an experimental document sounds like a good plan to me. That's quite separate from the BIS document, BIS 5666. We have to fix the version 1 problem separately, yes.
Agreed. So you put the stuff into the straight BIS docs that you know is busted, you know has to fix, you know has to be fixed or done right to get V4 to work. And then if this bidirectional stuff is, we want to dig here, we want to write an initial spec for how to dig so everybody's got something to work from so we can figure out whether it works or not.
Yes.
That's the kind of thing an experimental RFC is good for.
Okay, thank you.
So, hopefully the final comment from Tom. So Tom agrees to keep the bidirectional experimental and therefore in a separate draft. So basically what you just have discussed. However, we need to explore the callback issues and reserve the right to change our mind.
Yes. Okay. I think we need to move on. So, yes.
Sorry? NFS version 4 management. The no effect meeting. Hold on. Please get ready. Just to explain what's going on, I have a set of documents labeled -0, -1, -2, -3.
And are any of those labeled BIS?
No, no. Wait a minute, select files. Oh, was that the thing you just said? Yes. Okay. Got it. Hold on. You hold on.
Voila. Well, there's the title, so next slide. Okay, I'm going to be talking about two documents. One is is currently the working group document, of the initial version of the NFSV4 versioning document that Tom and I are working on, and also a personal draft, which is the O2 of NFS extension. We're talking about why I think we're here, how we got here, and how we can move forward in this area. And so that's the summary. Next slide. So we have a working group document, and I think a lot of people want to turn that into an RFC, and as soon as possible. But I think as soon as possible is not as soon as people might think, because there's a fair number of things that we have to do, including building some consensus on. We'll talk about that in the work group list. There are four major elements in the current document. One is the concept of XDR extension, and the second is you take that concept and use it to be able to avoid batching of features as we have done with minor versioning, and have the concept of extensible minor versions, allowing you to just generate a new feature definition document and have that be appended automatically to the protocol. Also addresses the issue of correcting protocol XDR if we find out that, despite the fact we've done more work as far as prototype implications, we may find out that something doesn't work or two features don't work well together. We may have to, at some point, face the problem of revising the protocol, including the protocol XDR, and how we can address how we can do that. And also, we get out of the habit that we had of having separate minor versioning rules in every minor version, and now we've moved toward having one list of those, and currently they're based on those in RFC 5661. So I updated this document. It had expired. It was about a year old, and basically I updated to reflect the changes over the last year. A lot of things that I said were happening in the future are now have happened or in the process of happening, and we need to focus. Those are in that working group document, and now focus on what we have to do to put those into an RFC. And also, in the process of writing that, I made one big discovery about NFSV 4.1. There are a fair number of non-XDR-based changes, and the minor versioning rules are all about XDR-based changes. And if version management has to address them somehow, one way to address them is say, gee, you can't do them. Another way is to say them, you can do them, but there's certain restrictions to prevent yourself from going crazy. Anyway, the working group needs to decide that, and that's the kind of thing we'll be discussing on the mailing list. Okay.
Is that how your world works?
All right. So this is my current best guess of why we are where we are. Well, first of all, we needed a protocol that could grow, and we knew that major versioning just wouldn't work anymore. It was just too disruptive. Someone came up with the XDR. I'm not sure who actually came up with this fundamental idea, but it was a good idea, XDR extension. And it was overshadowed by the idea of minor versioning. We started building these big minor versions, and it wasn't working very well. We never really put adequate effort into version management as a topic. It was always an afterthought. And, addressing specific features, specific needs seemed more important at the time. And the issue of the size of the specs that we're generating was not on our radar. And, it should have been on our radar. And that's been a factor that we've had to deal with. We've, we were going through the process of publishing the BIS, and everyone said, "Oh my God, this is 300 pages." And I heard that a number of times and said, "Well, gee, I thought it was small because it wasn't 600 pages." But the people who were reviewing it, they said, 300 pages, this is just enormous. Anyway. So how we got here? Well, we started with a 300-page document. It had to be a 300-page document. It was a major version. We had to have, or thought we had to have one big doc. And somehow, RFC 5661 was 600 pages. And there's a couple of, down here was a couple of quotes from the abstract of 5661. It's considered a separate protocol. It wasn't always considered a separate, it is a separate protocol. And it said it was deemed superior. Well, maybe it is superior, but anyway, we got 600-page specs, and after that experience, although I guess we decided, or the ISG decided for us, that not going to be specs that are that large. And then we tried V4.2. That was a spec that was under 100 pages, and it still took 4 years. I said 4 years because I'm assuming it's not going to go on as a result of the sequence of last calls we have, but it's not going to be much more than 4 years, but still it's 4 years. We decided we had to take version management more seriously than we had. And that's that's basically the essence of this effort. So, in NFS extension 00, I put forward the concept of XDR extension. It was really the core idea the idea at the core of the original minor version rules. When you think about it, it allows incremental protocol extension. That's a great thing. But for some reason, we got that concept of extension was tied to the creation of minor versions. And unfortunately, the production of large, or in case of IE492, the documents weren't that large, but the effort was enormous. So we're now in the long process of digging out of that situation. And the idea of the NFSV4 version manager RFC is to retain the XDR extension concept and then tie it from minor version creation and large documents. Next slide. So we've addressed the batching of features by the concept of extensible versions. This allows us to address minor versions like NFS4.2 more expeditiously. We could make the specs even shorter. As Tom points out, 10-page feature specs is a lot better or easier to manage than one 100-page minor version spec. And also, if there's a problem with one thing, it doesn't hold up everything else. We also want to prevent premature decisions as to the content of the minor version and make those decisions about what goes into the protocol only after the feature has a clear design and sufficient implementation work has been done. Also, we had to address, I guess Tom really pushed me to get this in, to address this, to address the issue of protocol correction. Fixing protocol bugs is hard because you need to accommodate, existing clients and existing servers, each of which may have the new or the old behavior or both. And to do that, you can make the old and new server behaviors alternative features, and the client can test for the presence of support. That's a good fit for the XDR extension model, if you're willing to extend the XDR, and therefore the idea that you can extend the XDR in that way is a good fit for that. And maybe if we have to face that, I hope we don't have to face that problem, but we may have to, and we have to be ready to address that. So the minor version rules in this document are currently based on those that are RFC 5661. And there's some lingering issues that we have. One is the thing of recommended versus capital recommended. And this was a problem when we were reviewing the BIS. Okay. In fact, if you look at the front page of the new RFC, it says, well, the terms, these 2919 terms is used as defined as 2919, except the words recommended and required when used about classes of attributes. It doesn't say what it means, but it's pretty clear that it's not what was meant by 2119. Also, another thing was inserted about, this is this weird paragraph in the existing rules about infrastructural features. And I couldn't make sense of it, but basically it says that, well, you must not make a feature required when it's introduced, except if it's really big and complicated and hard to implement. I don't know. Anyway, also going through the thing is this feature maturation model. It was never realized, and maybe we'll have to somehow address the rules to reflect that fact. There are a number of structural issues that have to address. What are called features in those rules are really what I would call change elements. And we later, I think Tom's work, came up with the concept of features at a set of related changes. And that's the best way to document them. The rules now deal with minor versions, not with features and changes. And so we need to reorganize the rules to do that and also somehow address the issue of non-XDR based changes. Next slide. So the basic decision to be made is, we had v4.0, which wasn't really a minor version, it was a major version. Then we had v4.1, which was an enormous thing, which, some people in the ISG said, well, maybe it should be called NFS v5. Well, maybe it should have, but that's water under the bridge. Anyway, so v4.2 was a good model to do things, and we wanted to do it better and quicker, and that was the original goal of the XDR extension concept. And then we have NFS 4.1 in this context, is the 100-year flood of minor versions. Maybe we don't want to have that again. But where do we want to draw the line between what is valid as a minor version and what isn't? One point of view is to say, gee, they should only be minor versions, should only be like v4.2. And I think that's not what we want to do. The working group will have to decide. The working group needs to discuss and come to consensus about that. First thing that we'll probably definitely have to say is, as a way of limiting things, is you cannot respecify the entire protocol. Is that the only restriction we need? Or is there other restrictions about what you can do? And I think there'll be some discussion of that. Next slide. So here's some individual decisions. Look at the things that were done in 4.1 and were not done in 4.2. Introduce required features. One thing you could do is just ban those, absolutely. Another thing that says, well, gee, if they're small enough and well controlled enough, maybe you can do that. Another thing that's allowed in the rules are changing of feature statuses, including making things mandatory to not implement it. Maybe you want to ban that, maybe you don't want to ban that. Other things, non-XDR based changes. For each of those possible things, you have to allow them, disallow them, or allow them with some restrictions. And there'll be some discussion about that. So in the next draft of the document, we need to organize the rules, because the current rules just deal with minor versions. And I talk about layering rules. Rules of what are the valid changes, how do you organize them into features, what are the rules about how you incorporate features into the protocol. And so we hope we'll have some comments and suggestions about that. I think that's it.
Okay. And, sorry. So you updated the old doc, am I tracking? You resurrected it, or what?
I resurrected,
okay.
yeah.
And are you going to down the alias? What's up? It's posted, and you're going to post it, and for any changes expected? Has it gone to the alias yet? Sorry.
Well, I took the announcement and forwarded it to the alias, and I think that, I don't think any changes in that. The next step, I think, is to take the working group doc and come out with a -01 of it. Now, I don't know whether I don't think we're going to, I think we need some working group discussion before we do that. It's not going to reach consensus, but I think I need to get some sense of what people want to see before I come up with the thing, and then we can use that as something that people can shoot at.
Okay. Can you send out ticklers to the mail list to get people's attention and get comments back to you before you?
Sure.
Okay. So
I'll do that.
And, with your expectation of you're not looking for perfection, but you're looking for feedback.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Questions? Comments? Tom, anything on the wire? Okay. Okay, thanks, Dave.
Okay.
What's up next? Approval of new working group documents? Working group chairs?
Yeah. So I think that might be related to, we've had several requests come in, for example, Christoph's personal document.
Is this SCSI one?
Yeah, the SCSI one. And on the alias, we had seen, we'd had a call for it to become a working group document. We saw several responses of support, no dissension. No, that was the XAdder one. That's a different issue. I think we've seen dissension on it, and I'd rather not make the decision myself. I'd rather it be done in the alias. So I don't think there's any slides for this.
So what are the, sorry. So is it only Christoph's document?
So there's Christoph's document, and then there's the XAdder document. Christoph's document has had no discussion or dissent. The XAdder document has had a lot of discussion and no sense of approval yet. Yes.
And
to have the XAdder on the mailing list.
So, any dissension here? So, declaration of consensus to adopt Christoph's document for our working group work? Yep. Okay. And then circle back on the Exeter? Exeter doc, Exeter doc. On alias, what's your sense of it? What does it need to converge to fish or cut bait? What's needed?
They did come up with a requirement, but now there's discussion about the technical merits.
Okay. Okay. Spencer, I will contact author.
There's a question from Tom again. Is the Exeter document already a working group item?
No.
No.
Yes, it's personal draft.
Okay. Okay. I have Spencer and I will try to guide the Exeter document forward to up or down. Okay. Is there? We are at the end, unless somebody. Went a little out of order. We're at the end, I think, of all the presentations. Does anybody believe that they have to say something here? Uh-oh.
You're going to regret asking that question, DP.
Well, no, it's not a big thing. Okay, so I'm unclear about the status of the migration document. I'm pretty sure we went through last call. I'm not sure what the process of what state of the process it is. This may be part of the AD overwork issue. I don't know, but I'd like it not to be dropped. Is that yes?
It's what?
Great. Not perfect, but it's getting better is what he's trying to say.
But is it on a queue somewhere? I just don't want it to get lost.
No. Zero.
It's what? It's in queue. Okay, great.
Okay. The document is in queue, according to Martin. Okay. I'm not going to ask that question again. So I would, if you haven't signed the blue sheet, sign the blue sheet. I think everybody did. I saw everybody with pen in hand, expressing their support of the NFS version 4 working group, ensuring that we will always get a room slightly larger than a closet for our meetings.
There's nothing about the noises.
Yes. I don't know what the hell is going on behind the walls over there. Large Texas rats. Anyway, on that note, everything's bigger in Texas. There's no further discussion. Thank you very much for attending. Enjoy the rest of the conference, please, and I'll see you next meeting. Is the next meeting in? Prague. Okay. So, all the people that didn't show up at Dallas, they're saving up all their little trips for the Europe boondoggle? Is that what the deal is here? Oh, did I touch a nerve on something? Okay. Bye, guys. Yeah.
Could you and I make sure that our action items line up for when I was talking? You were taking some notes for remembering some stuff, but I just want to make sure.
Okay. Yeah. No, that Spencer was staying on.
bar do you want?
Red? So.
Yes. Oh, I got it. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So,
No, we've got that's where I was. That's part of the week.
How come the checks can do this and we can't?
Tom Copley,
Busy replacing the small banknotes and bills.
Okay,
we're
so,
going to do this for both docs.
okay, decision on the preference for approach one. Okay, and then